Sharing the house with a ghost. Back in 2018, I was a young man, just graduated from my university, and fortunately, had found a job then in West City, a modern city. That was a small company and not a high-paid job, but that was lucky enough to me, still better than jobless. I had to try my best to save as much as possible, so I tried to find a cheap place to rent. I chose to rent a small room in a house next to my company. The house simply built some bedrooms for rent. Each of us had a small bedroom to stay in, a shared living room, bathroom, and kitchen. The landlord was an old lady in her 50s. We had a phone call before I came to see the room. My room was right next to the stair. There were 5 rooms there, a living room, a bathroom, and a kitchen in the house. The landlord knocked out a room. A male came to get the door, happily smiled at her. "Hello, Auntie Emma." Auntie Emma had told me that all of the tenants in the house were young, single, and just finished their studies. We all got a tiny budget for accommodation like me, so we would get lots of familiar to share the house. "Hello, Oliver. The empty room in the house is rented by this young man. I came to tell you the good news." The first one I met in the house was Oliver. "Hello, Oliver." "Hey, kid." He was a security guard in a mall and usually took his night shift. Before leaving, Auntie Emma told me, "Don't forget to clean up your room frequently and pay your rental fee in time. If there is anything, don't hesitate to give me a phone call." To be honest, I didn't like sharing my living space with strangers. Still, I could save tons of money and take advantage of sharing a house, such as I could share water and electricity fees monthly with them. "Might I know your name?" "I'm James. Nice to meet you." So I moved in. Oliver was accommodating and friendly, so I usually talked to him. "Auntie Emma lived here in the past, didn't she? Where did the others go? Why, there is only you in the house now." "I'm taking my night shift only, so there is only me in the house at daytime," he replied. I thought I would easily pump to the others if I moved in. But that was not that. Everyone had their own life, so I barely communicated to the others. Just lightly greeting. There were merely 5 rooms in that 100 square meters house, but I was unable to see the others in 10 days in a row. I moved in 10 days, but I only saw Oliver in the house and no one else. Then I saw Noah. He lived with his girlfriend, but I didn't like his attitude. Every time I tried to say hi, he looked like he wanted to ignore me. Another tenant was older than us. That was William. He was a gangster who always got a violent temper, so I thought I would rather not cross the line to him. My room was next to Oliver's room and then Noah's room. The sound insulation of the house wasn't good, so I heard Noah and his girlfriend making love every night, which annoyed me so much. Every time I felt annoyed, I punched the wall badly, hoped Noah and his girlfriend could make it politely. While everyone was taking a rest at night, he shouldn't keep bothering the others. One time, when smoking with Oliver on the balcony, I brought it up to him. We talked about Noah. I raised my voice. "I'm really annoyed with their lovemaking sound every night." I meant Noah and his girlfriend. But Oliver just gave me a light smile. "Kid, give sympathy. If you had a pretty girl like her, you would do that every night." Come to talk about Noah's girlfriend. I have never seen her since the day I moved in. Weirdly, how beautiful she is. "I have never seen her," Oliver told about Noah's girlfriend with an envious voice. He told me that Noah wasn't a handsome guy nor got a high-paid job. But fortunately, he got a pretty and obedient girlfriend. Afterward, I felt very weird. Even though I had moved into the house for more than a half month but saw no one. Looked like everyone had avoided seeing each other in the house. Regarding Noah's girlfriend, the more I heard from Oliver, the more I got curious about her. That was not like in my hometown. A stranger nearby is better than a faraway relative. The neighbors got even closer than relatives, but live in modern life, especially in the city. People seemed to be cool-hearted in real life. They were easily able to open up with a stranger on the internet, but not with the people nearby. Oliver and I also got very little chance to talk to each other. Still, every time we met up, we usually talked about Noah and his girlfriend, so I became more curious about them. One day, finally, I got a chance to see Noah's girlfriend for the first time. But not her face, just her back on the bed through the opening door. Right at that moment, Noah realized I was looking at his room, his girlfriend, so he slammed the door in my face with an upset face. His eyes were like he would like to kill me. That made me both embarrassed and annoyed. Embarrassed because I was like a talkative man and got caught, and annoyed because of his attitude. That was as if I would take his girlfriend away or something. I turned down his eyes and stepped toward my room. After then a few days, that was around 9 p.m., I was lying in bed and playing the game on my phone as usual. I heard William the gangster was screaming aloud in the living room. He smelt some unpleasant smell. What the hell is this smelt? I opened my door a little and stared out at the living room to see what happened. I wanted to avoid William, so I didn't want to come out. He still yelled out there. A moment later, Oliver came out and asked William, "William, what happened?" William was likely to have someone in his back. "Do you smell something?" "That is really horrible. Where the smell came from?" I didn't like William, but first had to accept the fact that there was an unpleasant smell in the house. Oliver said, "Yes, that is it. Might be there if someone forgot to bring their garbage bag out. I'll remind them then." Oliver advised William should come back to his room and stop yelling so that everyone could take a good rest at night. I backed to my bed and continued to play the game until 11 p.m. I came out to the bathroom. I turned the light in the living room and went to the bathroom. I got startled when seeing a female shadow standing in the bathroom. I saw her back and thought she was Noah's girlfriend. I tended to turn back to my room and waited for her to finish then. But I sensed something abnormal. Why was she standing there without the light on? I didn't hear the water sound, but she was standing in front of the mirror. Why was she standing there? It was too silent to hear the water counter sound in the bathroom. Curiously, I turned my eyes out to the bathroom. Since there was no light on, so I was unable to see what she was doing inside. But when looking down to her feet, I saw she was standing in a pool of blood. She was bleeding. Blood was pouring from her body. I was in a daze. What happened to her? Is she trying to suicide by cutting her wrist? "What are you doing, kiddo?" I got startled by Oliver's voice. "Noah's girlfriend, I saw her. I sputtered and told Oliver what I had seen in the bathroom. I saw Noah's girlfriend in there, and blood was everywhere. "Who? Where?" Oliver looked towards the bathroom, but he was unable to see things like me. Once I heard that, I gave my eyes to the bathroom one more time. But the girl indeed was not there. There was no one in the bathroom. Oliver wanted to use the bathroom, so he pushed the door and spoke up, "Is there anyone here?" I came after him. I looked inside, and indeed no one there. Oliver teased me up, "Don't play online games too much. Your vision turned bad, kid." I ignored what he told me. My eyes gazed to the bathroom floor where I saw Noah's girlfriend before. There was no blood, even a drop, so I started to doubt my vision. Did I get dizzy? "Okay. Kiddo. Come out. I need to pee now." Oliver pushed me out of the bathroom. I heard his voice from the bathroom, "You gotta hit the sack early. Don't play games too much, you know, it's not good to your eyes absolutely." I still thought about what I had seen. I assured that I wasn't misrecognized, but I could not explain. Afterward, I backed to my room, then passed out. The following morning, I had been waked by William's voice. He yelled and knocked on Noah's door impolitely, "Noah! Noah! Come out here." I was unsure what could happen. I swiftly wore my t-shirt and came out. There were William, the gangster, Oliver, and another tenant upstairs standing in front of No's door. I came to Oliver and asked, "What happened, Oliver?" "Look at the floor." Oliver asked me to look at the floor. Oliver and I looked at the floor. There were a bunch of wriggled maggots on the floor. Those maggots were crawled from No's room and brought a very unpleasant smell. We were all unable to imagine how the young couple could stay in a dirty room like that. Hearing the violent knock door, Noah opened his door a little, enough to show his head out with his tired voice. "What do you guys want?" William, the ganger, could not go easy on Noah. He stormed to his room and yelled at him, "What do I want? Your room's smell is very terrible." We couldn't stay still anymore. Right after he widened the door, the stench came badly to everyone's noses. We had to hold our nose to step in. What I had noticed was No's girlfriend was sleeping on the bed, her clothes and her posture just exactly like what I had seen the day before. Looked like she didn't move for days. "What wrong with you guys? My girlfriend was sleeping, see?" Noah was surprised and yelled back at us. "What are you putting inside your room? And make that stench? How could you guys live like this? Clean up. Don't let that unpleasant smell annoys the others in the house." William was saying to Noah and looking around to check where the stench from. Oliver also went around Noah's room to see, and all of a sudden, he looked at Noah's girlfriend in the bed. He was too frightened to stand. He fell off, backed on the wall, and called us out. Noah realized something. He rushed to the bed and tended to cover his girlfriend with the blanket. But I and William had enough time to go to the other side of his bed. William shouted aloud, "Noah, are you fucking out of your mind? Is this your girlfriend?" Right after I saw his girlfriend on the bed, I thought he might be insane. On the bed wasn't a human. That was a female mannequin. Noah was surprised when we could see the dummy. He got flushed. "Leave me alone. Get out of my room now." That was so funny to us. I didn't know Noah was a pervert like that. William let us out. He ridiculed us on the way out. "Let's go, guys. But you gotta clean up, Mr. Smelly." Once we got to the cabinet, all of a sudden, the cabinet's door opened. Something was coming out from the cabinet. Out of the blue, there was a dead female body falling out from Noah's cabinet. That was too fast for me to dodge. The dead body fell out at me. My legs were like jelly. I fell to the floor. The corpse was likely to be hidden on the cabinet for days. It started to decompose. There were many maggots around, and they jumped to my face. I screamed out loud, jumped out of my skin. I threw the corpse away. Oliver and the others pulled me up. Noah tended to escape from there, but William had detained him. You might guess what would happen next. We called the police. The case wasn't complicated. Noah was the culprit. He killed his girlfriend since she wanted to break up with him. She had died for days. Her body had been hidden in the cabinet since Noah found a place to destroy the dead body. He bought a dummy and placed it on his bed, backed out the door so that people thought his girlfriend was sleeping and still alive. To Oliver and William, the gangster, they had just a little scared, probably because they lived with a corpse for a few days, but to me, it was different. I got disgusted at William while after the corpse had felt at me. Even until now, I still got goosebumps and nausea when thinking about that, and I was very sure that particular night, I had seen Noah's girlfriend's spirit. The swing. Mateo, the old man, was a janitor in West's apartment. His job was just like another janitor. He was responsible for cleaning up the roads, hallways in the properties. He was kind, honest, and hardworking, so everyone respected him. When people in the apartment saw the old man, they all would say hi to him and strike a friendly conversation. Even Jack, who people are supposed to be a weirdo in the apartment, also could talk to the old man. Usually, Jack barely spoke to anyone. He always wore some weird clothes and sunglasses. He was a shaman. People tried to avoid communicating with Jack because of his antisocial and might be people thought there was something not good about him. But to the old man, he was just like the others. He always talked to him happily when seeing Jack. "Jack, are you going out?" The two of them always easily strike a conversation about any kind of topic such as healthcare, Tai Chi Chuan. But then Mateo, the old man, was likely to get some health issues. He looked not well, so he didn't talk much to anyone. Normally, the old man would start his job before 6 a.m., but then he kept starting his job 1 hour late. The apartment manager had found out the weird behavior of him, so he came to ask the old man out. "Mateo, do you get in any trouble at home lately? Why you came to work late and leave earlier than usual? Is your job too hard for you? Is there anything I can help with?" The old man heard those words from the manager and got confused. He didn't know what to answer these questions. That day, Jack awakened earlier since he got a business, and by coincidence, he saw the old man in the yard. Jack tended to come closer to the old man to say hi. Seeing the old man's face, he guessed the old man must have been in trouble. He asked the old man, "Uncle Mateo, I could see that you're unhappy today. Could you tell me what happened to you?" The old man looked at Jack. Even he got a bit hesitant, but he decided to tell Jack the truth since he thought Jack could help him out. "Jack, I know there would be only you could help me out, so I am going to tell you now. It turned out recently, every morning when walking by the exercise yard, the old man had seen a bizarre thing. The swing in the yard automatically moved in front of him. Besides, he could hear a weak little voice sounded like a baby crying. The sound was slight and grievous in every swing move as well. After then, he saw and heard those stuff, again and again, every day. He suspected that he had been haunted, so he was worried sick. That's the reason why he starts his job an hour earlier than usual." Jack was unable to believe it at first and asked to confirm, "Is it windy at that time?" "Probably the swing had been blown by the wind?" Mateo, the old man, explained, "I could assure it was no wind at that time, trust me. I didn't mistake it. Obviously, there were two swings, but there was only one of them moved." After hearing those, Jack got ponder. Still, he got his stuff to settle and unable to stay there any longer, so he set it aside for the following day. "Uncle Mateo, I have work to do today. I'll come to see you tomorrow, we'll figure this out, no worries." Then he hurriedly left, just a blink of an eye. That was the following day. In the morning, Jack and the old man came to the exercise yard of the apartment as promised. At first, everything was like usual, but the old man was getting more and more uncomfortable. He assured me that the swing would move, and that was really happening. Besides, there was a baby crying sound. The swing made a creaky sound. It was terrifying. It was no wonder the old man got tired and exhausted lately. He actually got scared every day when seeing those strange events. "That's it, look at that," the old man told Jack. He was pale and stepped back. Jack still kept his calm, immobilized. He could read the scene instantly. He saw a small shadow. A skinny boy was sitting on the swing and swinging back and forth. The boy had no hair, his face was pale, he was swinging and crying. Jack told the old man, "Uncle Mateo, I knew what happened now. We are not able to be here anymore to bother the little boy. Let's come to another place to talk." Then the two of them went to another place to talk, which took no time to figure it out. The following morning, everything was happening like usual. The sun still shined, and the birds still sang around the apartment. There were 4 people in the exercise yard. 2 of them were Jack and the old man. The other 2 were a man and a woman. The four of them were standing there and waiting for something. Not long later, the abnormal event happened again. The swing started to swing as if someone was sitting on it. And the sound started, the familiar crying sounds. Right after the woman heard the voice, she could not hold back her tears. Jack handed up, advised the woman not to cry, because the boy doesn't want her to cry. The woman heard those words and got calmer. She stopped crying. "Follow me," Jack told her. He took the woman to the swing and asked her to hold the swing with her two hands. When everything had been ready, Jack asked her to push the swing. "All right, now try to push the swing gradually." The woman tried to hide her sadness on the face and lightly push the swing. Gradually, the swing was pushed higher and higher. Once the swing moved up high, the cry sound had gone, and instead, there was a consequence of cheerfully baby laughter. At that moment, the woman was unable to hold her emotion, cried aloud, "My dear son, it's me here. I am going to play with you one last time. Rest in peace, honey. We're unable to have a chance to live together that long this life. Next time I am going to take good care of you, I promise. I'll not let you be sad or suffering anymore." After the woman finished, the waves of laughter gradually faded out as if fly away until they disappeared entirely in the morning sunshine. Back to the story, at the moment Jack saw the child on the swing and told the old man what he had seen. That was a boy who was playing the swing, skinny, no hair, so he was sure that the boy had been died because of deadly illness. The old man heard what Jack described and realized instantly, probably that was Sophia's kid at this apartment earlier, the kid named Luke. He got inborn leukemia, and unfortunately had died, such a poor kid. But since their kid had died, they had moved to another place. The hospital fee for their kid was way too expensive. They had to sell everything, furniture, house, cars. "I have no ideas where they are living by now," the old man said. Jack deduced, "We should come to see the manager, might be he had the information." Fortunately, everything went well. The old man and Jack could find Luke's parents. The two went to the apartment the following day. That was indeed Luke, the leukemia patient, and passed away when he was just 6 years old. His parents tried their best to curve him, but he could not make it alive to his 7th birthday. Before he got sick, Luke was a lively, outgoing kid, and his favorite outside game was a swing with his mother in the yard of the apartment. Probably, it was too short for him to enjoy life. He was unable to aware of the deadly sickness that had killed him. He was consumed by the nostalgia of his old days when he was playing swing in the yard with his mom. Pray for the fruit of the womb. You might all know how important a child to the happiness of a family, a home, birth to kids, and raise babies are human nature and become the mission of most people. So no kid is one of the main reasons to break a couple. The story today I'm gonna tell you relates to no kid issue. Pray for the fruit of the womb. The door was slammed loudly. There must have been someone angrily closed the door. Isabella got used to that. That was her drunk husband. Every time arguing, the husband always slammed the main door and headed out the whole night, left her at home with the emptiness. The reason for the argument related to her mother-in-law. The couple had been married for years but still had no kid. Her mother-in-law always brought it up and rocked the boat, pressured the husband, paved the way for their intense arguments more frequently. Could you just one time ignore what your mother said? Having kids are natural. We have already moved heaven and earth for it. Why do you keep talking back to my mom? She just wants the good things for us. Isabella wasn't infertility, and James, her husband, was also normal. The two went to the hospital to check up dozens of times, which was a few years after their marriage. So, they got worried but always heard the familiar result from the doctor: "You're too normal, and able to have kids." How many times we tried. We still have no kids? James is my only son. His dad died already. Don't let me die without seeing my grandson. Every time the mother brought the topic up, James always got his wife back in front of her. "Mom, let's it as natural. We still love each other, and living very happy. Kids are just sooner or later." But days after days, James had changed. Every time he heard his mom's innuendos, he chose to stay quiet. "There is only a hen in the house but unable to lay an egg. I don't know what I have done to be suffering like this. God, please bless us." Isabella was very depressed. She could feel that her husband had changed. He didn't stand up for her in front of his mom anymore. He didn't love her like the old days. Deep down, she was so disappointed and popped out lots of questions. Why everything turned to be like this? Does he still love me? That isn't my fault? The arguments became more and more intense and happened every day. No one put a step back or walked in the other's shoes. "You don't love me anymore. What about you? Have you ever given empathy for my difficulties and pressures out there? Have you even finished your duty as a wife to give me a baby? What? How could you say that? The doctor said that I'm normal, I'm not infertility." The mother didn't like Isabella initially. She just kept quiet at their arguments. She was even excited to hear those. She felt that was kinda her son's loss, so she ridiculed Isabella. "A hens have to lay eggs. How could you still stay in this house?" Isabella got more and more depressed. She thought about divorce but came to think it carefully. She still loved her husband. Day by day, she was inconsolable. "Why do you treat me like that? The whole thing you had talked to me before all lies?" She felt that her husband was not by her side anymore. To women, that was the most heartbroken thing. That night, Isabella backed home from the office as usual, but she didn't want to head home right after then. She was scared of the heavy atmosphere in the house, so she walked slowly on the way home, step by step, and let her mind running wild. An old gray-hair lady holding a torn bag and stared at her, which made the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. When she tried to walk faster to pass by her, the lady called her, "Hey, young lady, such predestined. Let me consult you a fortune teller." Isabella wasn't interested in a fortune teller. She tended to leave as quick as she could. From graduation, Isabella didn't believe in that superstitious stuff. To her, a fortune teller was irrational and didn't worth believing. She replied politely to the old lady, "I don't need to, thank you very much." But the old lady kept following Isabella all the way and tried to convince her, "You gotta listen to me. This relates to your family happiness, young lady." Isabella kept quiet, looked like she agreed, so the old lady continued, "I know, you have no child for years. You're waiting for a child. You could pray Guanyin for the fruit of the womb." Isabella heard the old lady could read her mind. She stopped walking. "Nanny, does that really work? Pray her for the fruit of the womb?" "Yes, that's it." Honestly, Isabella was crazy about having a kid. If she were still unable to have a kid, her marriage would be broken. Even though she didn't believe what the old lady told her was 100% true, but deep down, she hoped the old lady could help. "Nanny, to pray Guanyin for having a kid. What should I do now? And how much does it cost?" Once the old lady heard Isabella's innocent words, she stopped her from saying any more words. She looked at Isabella seriously. "Young lady, stop talking like that before the superior would upset at you. That is not the thing you could buy with money. You need a little of destiny and show your sincerity. Not everyone could have this opportunity." Isabella didn't know how to pray correctly, so how? "How could I pray? Could you show me the way?" The old lady replied, "I know you're miserable. I understand your situation. Now come home. You have destined to see her, she would help you out." After finishing, the old lady handed Isabella a small statue, which was the Guanyin statue she had mentioned before, told Isabella to bring it home, and took Guanyin worship. Isabella took the statue with scare and confusion. She was shy, but she was full of hope. Isabella held the statue in her hands, and watching her carefully, she murmured, "Guanyin, could you please bless me this time?" No one obviously answered her question at that moment. She faced up and saw the old lady had walked away from her. She still could hear the old lady was leaving her last words, "In your lifetime, you reap what you sow." Her voice was likely to be from Isabella's hands. She got a slight shiver. She scared to be there any longer, so she hurriedly backed home as if she was running away from something. Right at the moment she reached home, the door opened, and she saw her mother-in-law with a dark face. Her eyes stared at Isabella. The light lighted half of her face. She looked scary as a ghost. Isabella turned on the lights. She realized that it was her mother-in-law. "Mom, you are scaring me to death. What are you doing? Why are you standing here?" The mother stepped away after glaring at Isabella without a word. Then she talked in an exaggerated tone of voice. "How could you turn the light on when it's not dark yet? That is all my son's money, not your, so you don't give a damn care?" Isabella got a bit offended. She mumbled, "I could make money." She wasn't making more money than her husband. Still, she was hard-working every day. Her mother-in-law was excessive. Isabella took the Guanyin statue from her bag out and placed it on the top of a cabinet in the living room. Her mother-in-law seeing all of that, so she unable to stay still. "What is that? Where did you get that? Do you bring those stuff to curse me or something?" With a wry smile, Isabella replied, "Mom, what are you talking about? This is Guanyin. I'm praying for a son. We need to show our sincerity. So that Guanyin could bless us a boy. Don't you love to have a grandson?" The mother always believed in God and Guanyin, so she was embarrassed and prayed for Guanyin to forgive her. After then, the mother went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. James backed home. The whole family sat together to have dinner. The mother suddenly picked up food to Isabella's bowl. "You gotta eat more protein." That made Isabella a bit astounded. After dinner, James curiously asked his wife, "What happened between you and Mom? How weird she is today." Isabella knew James would ask after that. She replied, "Don't you happy when seeing me and your mother live in harmony?" After a few chats, the two of them hit the sack. At midnight, Isabella heard a light voice around. "Blood, I want to drink blood. Blood." Isabella awakened and came to find where the voice from. She went to the living room. There was only a dim lamp. She saw the Guanyin statue was glowing a demonical red light. The voice was from the statue. "Blood, I want to drink blood. Bring me blood quickly." Isabella went to the kitchen, took the knife, and as what the statue had told, she cut a small one on her wrist and dropped her blood to the statue. The dim light on the statue became brighter red. Just like that, night after night, Isabella cut her hand and dropped her blood to the statue secretly. A month later, Isabella felt something weird growing on her body. She came to see the doctor with her husband and got the good news. "Congratulations! Your wife is pregnant." "Really? Thank you, Doc." Hearing Isabella got pregnant, everyone was very happy. The happiest one was actually the mother. She had been waiting for that for too long. She started to take very good care of her daughter-in-law. She afraid Isabella would lack nutrition and affect her grandson. She prepared and cooked lots of good food for her daughter-in-law. "Dear, what do you want to eat? Just tell me, you got pregnant. You gotta take a good rest. You know, your son is growing inside your body." Isabella had lived a miserable life for years, but she was a queen at that moment. Of course, she was on the 9 clouds and enjoyed everything. When urging something to eat, She told the mother that the mother would also happily prepare her even at night. Isabella completely trusted in the Guanyin statue. She thought the Guanyin had blessed her a kid. She kept feeding the statue with her blood every night. Still, since her belly got bigger, she could not move easily. She thought about using her mother-in-law's blood. She called the mother and told her, "Mom, do you want to know why I got pregnant? Tell me, what happened?" The mother curiously asked Isabella. Isabella told the mother everything and the part she dropped her blood every night secretly to the statue. "This baby was gifted to us by Guanyin, but to be blessed, I used my blood in exchange." Isabella touched her belly while talking, which touched the mother. Hearing all of that, the mother was worried for Isabella and her grandson's well-being. Even she was terrified, but she gotta keep her grandson's life at any cost. Isabella continued, "Mom, it's nearly my give birth time. If I kept using my blood to feed the statue, I'm afraid it would not be good for my son." The mother replied instantly, "That's okay. I'm here, let me handle this." She went to the kitchen, cut a line to the wrist, and dropped her blood to the statue. She saw the statue lighted up and got convinced. She believed that would work. Since then, they were happy together. They kept the secret about the statue. The mother hoped her grandson would be delivered to the world, growing up, living a happy life. She could feel his tiny feet off her daughter-in-law belly. Her eyes were full of hope and joy. Isabella was afraid her husband would blame her if he knew what was happening, so she carefully told the mother not to tell anyone. Otherwise, Guanyin would take her blessings back. "Mom, you must keep this in secret, or else I'm afraid everything would not run well." "No worries. I'll not tell anyone for my grandson's safety." And then, every night, the mother had to feed the Guanyin by her blood. That particular afternoon, Isabella fell asleep after a meal, so she went to bed and passed out. She had a dream. She saw a baby whose bloody face was staring at her. Isabella awakened from the dream and screamed aloud. Hearing her scream, the mother came to her and asked out, "What happened?" Isabella screamed out with a frightened face, "No. This is not my son. No." After hearing those weird words, the mother thought that was because she had fed the statue less blood earlier, so she came hurriedly to the kitchen, grabbed the knife, and tended to cut her wrist. "Don't hurt the baby, don't blame it. I'll give you my blood." Right before the mother used the knife to cut her wrist, James reached home. Seeing his mother's weird behavior, he recognized something must have been wrong. "Mom, what are you doing?" James tried to stop her, but coincidentally, he dropped the Guanyin statue. Mom, what wrong with you?" The Guanyin statue dropped to the ground and scattered in pieces. All of a sudden, he heard a scream in the bedroom. "Isabella, are you okay?" James ran to the bedroom to check his wife while the mother kept crying her eyes out, "Don't take the baby away." His wife fell to the ground. She was bleeding, with lots of blood. Her belly was likely to be stabbed by something. She died. James came closer to see what was on her belly. The Guanyin statue was covered by blood, very scary. The mother came after him. Seeing that bloody scene, she got frightened crazily. "Oh no! My grandson." After then, people saw a crazy woman hold a Guanyin statue in her hands, roaming around the street. Following her is the poor son, who tried to stop her. She was running and screaming, "My grandson, my grandson." After a certain amount of time, the crazy woman and her son had moved out of the city. Then this story had spread from people to people around the town. An eye for an eye. Talk about Jack's job. He was different from the other shamans. People thought that was an old-fashioned, traditional job. But with Jack, that was contrary, except for his weird fashion. Jack was a modern shaman. He could apply new technologies to his job. He usually used social network apps to reach out to his clients, such as Facebook, WeChat. Many clients had used his website to book a schedule with him. Most of his clients were young people, or at least at middle ages. Rarely had a senior reached him out. That was a day at the weekend when Henry, his roommate, played an online game on his phone in the living. There was a knock door sound. "Come in a sec." Henry was a bit irritated, came to get the door. Why would people bother him at that time? He knew that no one could come to see him as usual. People might ask for Jack since Jack had placed their apartment's address on his website. Henry opened the door. A young man in his 20s was standing there. He got a withering, tired face and dark circles around his eyes. "Excuse me. Is there Jack home?" the young man asked. The young man indeed asked for Jack as Henry thought. "Come in. He's home." The young man shyly stepped into the apartment. Henry pointed toward a room. "He's at that room." The young man smiled at him, shook his head to thank Henry, and stepped towards the room. The young man was Matthew. He was from a small province, came to the city to make a living. He was a waiter at a nightclub. Matthew came to see Jack since he got a weird dream earlier. "You said you dreamt that one dream again and again lately. Could you tell me what you are dreaming?" Jack asked the vital point. Matthew vaguely told about his nightmares. "Lately, I dreamt about a girl, a crying girl. She looked so pathetic." He saw a crying girl at the corner. He was unable to let the girl crying like that. He came to soothe her. "Hey. What wrong? Let's tell me, might be I could help you." Once Matthew got closer to her, the girl turned to him out of the blue and tended to grab his neck. Her face got closer to Matthew, made him scared to death. The girl, or to be more exact, the ghost girl, had no eyeballs. He could see there were only eye sockets. Her face got rotten terribly. Hearing all of that, Jack furrowed his eyebrows. "Except for crying, did she told you any things in the dream?" Matthew dispelled him. "At that moment, I was scared the shit out of me. How could I came close to her or asked her anything? I come here and ask you if you could help me to escape from the girl in my dream. Escape from those nightmares so that I could have a good sleep at night." That was Matthew, who had been bothered by the nightmares in days. He was scared of the night. He could not sleep tight since every time he closed his eyes, he all saw that nightmare. Jack gave him a light smile and explained. "That girl must have been unhappy at something. As long as you don't find the root cause why she was unhappy, you still trap in that nightmare loop." Matthew was confused. He didn't know what to do. He said he was very scared when seeing the girl in his dream. How could he ask what happened to her? "What? Are you kidding me? I don't even have a gut to come closer to her. How could I ask her what happened?" Afterward, Jack stood up and finalized, "Don't worry, I'ma ask for you." That was what Matthew wanted to hear. He came to see Jack for that. The two of them came out. When passing by the living room, seeing Henry was playing the online game, he asked, "Hey, roommate, have free time? Wanna have a walk with us?" At that moment, Henry knew that Jack must have walked out to finish his job. He always got curious and excited about those spiritual events. How could he miss the opportunity? "Okay. My pleasure. I don't have any plans this afternoon. I'll come with you guys." The three of them came to Matthew's dormitory. The dorm was initially a private room, but there was an unknown reason it had been turned into a dorm room. A stuffy room, no windows, so no one would like to stay there, but to Matthew, he would love staying as long as that was a free accommodation. He didn't need to choose. Jack stepped into the room and walked around. Then he squatted in the middle of the room and wrote some weird words by a red marker on the floor. After then, He took out a plastic bag containing a red liquid, looked like animal blood, 2 sticks, and a white candle as well. He demanded Matthew brought him a bowl. Jack poured out the red liquid to the bowl and put it on the top of those words. Then he tied the 2 sticks to be a cross, put them in the bowl, fired the candle, and placed it at the junction of the 2 sticks in the middle of the blood bowl. Afterward, Jack stood up and gave the other 2 a mysterious place. "All right, let's call the girl out to talk." The other 2 got their heart out of their chest, but to be honest, Henry had strongly believed in his roommate. He knew that even the ghost girl came out, Jack could handle her well. Regarding Matthew, he wanted to get out of his nightmare as quickly as possible. Even it was so intense, he tried to pull himself together. Jack closed the door, turned all the lights off, then fired the candle. Right after the candle had been fired, the whole room lighted up. Jack took a fabric doll out, tied it up, and put the doll in front of the candle. Under the candlelight, the shadow of the fabric doll had reflected the wall, zoomed out, and looked like a human shadow. That was normal until the head of the shadow started to move. Henry gave a careful look and realized that, but he still kept quiet. A face was faded in. The ghost girl appeared to fly out from the wall, from the shadow's position. At that moment, Henry and Matthew were too scared to move. But Jack still kept his calm as always, until the girl came out of the wall completely. Matthew was too scared to look at the girl in the face. Just by a glance, he was sure that she was the girl who had haunted his dreams and turned those into nightmares. However, the girl or the ghost girl wasn't aggressive as in Matthew's dream. She stood there, froze, and stared at Jack. Jack spoke up first. "I know you had a miserable life, but you gotta tell me what happened so that I could help you out. Don't hurt innocent people, and drown to your sins." The ghost girl cried out. After a while, she could pull herself together and told them her tragic past. "Please help me." She was Sophia. 2 years earlier, she came there and worked as a waitress at the nightclub. Her family was very poor, so she had to support her family as the big sister. She had her old parents and her brother a student. At that time, Sophia's mother had been sick. In desperation, she asked the nightclub owner Mr. Oliver to lend $5,000 to pay her mom's medical bill. She promised she would pay all of that money back to Mr. Oliver after 2 years. "Master Oliver, please help me. I'll pay you back all of that money in 2 years." He gave her a wicked smile and talked to her as if he was a generous man. "The most important thing is saving your mother, don't worry about money." The following days, Sophia started to work her ass off. She worked both day and night. She had worked overtime and hoped to pay her debt as quickly as possible. But it's life, tragedy still happened to her. One day, Mr. Oliver called Sophia to his private room. Sophia came and knocked on the door. "Master Oliver, do you call for me?" Sophia stepped into the room. She could smell the booze, and Mr. Oliver's face was red as a cherry. She knew that he was so drunk. He asked Sophia to come closer to him. "Here you are. Let's come here and have a seat." Sophia sat next to him. He reminded her about her debt. "Sophia, when will you give my money back?" Sophia froze, face down, and sputtered to him, "Master Oliver, that is lots of money to me. I'm unable to pay you back this time. Please give me 2 years. I'll pay you back for sure." The old man Oliver laughed, pointed out to the wine on the table, and asked her, "Sophia, do you see that wine bottle? If you could drink all of that bottle in a gulp, I'll cancel your debt. You don't need to pay anymore. What do you think?" Sophia heard those words. Even she was so scared, but her eyes sparked a hope. She grabbed the wine up, tried to drink in a gulp, and finally, she could make it. It was heavy drinking. Her belly got a reaction, began to fizzle. Her vision got blur. she dizzily put the empty bottle back on the table. "Master, look, I drank it all in a gulp as you requested. Do you really cancel all of my debt?" Oliver looked at her without changing his facial expression. He leaned towards her and got closer to Sophia's face. "Sophia, you really don't let me disappointed. You got the potential." He put his hands on Sophia's shoulder and touched her. "Look, why don't you use your potential to make more money? If you say, yes, you could make more than that, you know, just a bit relaxing." Even though she got alcohol on her body, Sophia still got her consciousness. She still understood what Oliver had referred to her. A shame feeling had risen all around her. She slapped the old man and cursed him, "You son of the bitch." Oliver was a bit surprised. Then he glared at her angrily. He trampled Sophia down so that she fell to the ground. He called out some gangsters to teach her a lesson. She had been beaten violently and got vomiting blood, then passed out. She had one foot in the grave. Oliver scolded his people. "What are you doing? Why did you beat her badly like this? If she dies, that is all because of you." And then, Sophia had really died. Since there was no one in the room, they had buried her under the room's ground and turned the room to be a dorm to cover the scene. After hearing the truth, Jack gave a sign and asked her, "You already knew who is your enemy. Why you don't come to see him and take revenge? Why are you doing all of this?" Sophia sadly replied, "I don't know why I couldn't step out of this room. Something is holding me back here." Jack stayed quiet a while, then he came out to check the door. Then Jack took out a scissor, surprised. That old man was not only just done bad things, but also knew how to stop you to revenge. He knew that you might come after him, so he put this at the door to detain you. He holds the scissor and looked at Sophia. "You're free now. I take out your obstacle. You could go out and do whatever you want." The ghost girl gave him a big smile. The three of them saw Sophia left the room with her blurred silhouette. Matthew then told us after that night, he heard Oliver got into a car accident. He didn't die fortunately then, but had been crazy. He had been sent to a psychiatric hospital. He always in panic and trash talking about a ghost girl who came to him and asked him an eye for an eye. Curse of the Pond. This is the story that happened when I was a little kid. There was an unfortunate ending, for more precisely, this is a strategic story. When I was 7 or 8 years old, my two best friends and I hung out together happily every day. We usually played at a small pond nearby. The pond had been a hollow before. As time passed, a large amount of rainwater had formed it, so it was not really a large pond. Even though it was not a large pond or a deep water level, kids like us didn't allow to go there since that was dangerous to kids. The pond was a familiar place to us and built our enjoyable childhood memories, full of joy and tons of games there, like catching frogs or fishing. We excitedly looked at the jumping frogs between the rocks and the water's surface from the pond's bank, or we used small stones and threw to the water to see whose rock went the furthest. Moreover, we liked watching a school of fishes swimming in the water. We had been curious how those fishes could live under the water in that pond. To be frank, that was just a large puddle. Back then, my best friends were Michael and Lucas. We were very close to each other, opened up everything, and went together everywhere. That particular day, we went to the pond. Then suddenly, it rained. The more we waited, the heavier the rain was. We rushed back to our houses. Then it rained the whole of that night heavily. Fortunately, it stopped rain the following day. The sun rose and brought warm weather. As usual, Michael, Lucas, and I went to school together. We talked about the heavy rain last night. Lucas spoke up, "It rained cats and dogs last night. Then Michael asked us an odd question: have you guys ever seen yourself before? Of course, I see myself every day in the mirror. Lucas teased glibly at Michael's question. Michael was serious about that. He frowned and emphasized, "No. I don't mean your reflection in the mirror. I meant in real life." Lucas and I objected to him. "No way. How could? That would definitely not possible if that is not in front of a mirror." Then Michael told us what happened in the morning. "I saw myself this morning." He was so determined. That morning, he woke up and went out. Once, he went to the bathroom. He saw a boy stepped out of the bathroom. Michael was dazzled from what he could see. The boy was him, from the face, the posture, and the clothes. He got paralyzed when the boy passed him by. Michael looked at his back until the boy went to his house. But he needed to pee badly, so he was unable to follow the boy instantly. He went to the bathroom first. Once he back to his house, Michael checked every single room in his house but could not see another him anymore. While having breakfast, Michael told what he had seen to his parents. "Mom, Dad, I just went to the bathroom and saw another boy who looked exactly like me. He walked from the bathroom and stepped to our house. But his parents thought he was playing dumb and trash talking. His mom ignored him. Don't keep talking trash. Let's eat, then go to school, or else you're gonna be late." Before Michael leaving, his mom gave him a warning: "Don't go to the pond after classes. You gotta go straight home, hear me? It rained the whole night yesterday, so it must be dangerous out there." "I know, Mom." After Michael finished, I got a goosebump. I recalled some of my grandma's stories. "Does that your soul, the one you saw?" "Oops, never mind. That doesn't make any sense." Lucas teased Michael. "So, do you think you could see your soul because you're gonna die very soon?" He kept the joke until I got annoyed and reminded him that he shouldn't talk about that unfortunate stuff like that, so Lucas had stopped then. Michael was my classmate. What he had told me kept stuck in my head, so I kept a close eye on him. There was nothing special about him that day. He looked sleepy, and a bit lacked energy. Time flew. The bell sounds of finishing school had rung. Michael, Lucas, and I walked together while discussing where we should go after school. At that moment, we walked by a woman carrying a toddler and walking opposite us. Once we came closer, the little boy had cried aloud. His face was frightened as if he had looked at something scary. The toddler gazed his eyes at Michael. After walking by the woman for a while, we discussed why the little boy had cried. I have no ideas why the toddler cried like that when seeing Michael. Me too. That was because Michael is so ugly, so the toddler got scared of. Haha. Then we teased Michael with our childish jokes. When walking through the village, we saw another weird event. A stray dog was looking for food at the rubbish heap on the street. Once we came by, the dog barked and looked at us angrily. The dog's hair was bristling. We all thought that the nature of the stray dog, it probably was afraid of us, might hit it. The bark was too loud, it stared at us. We didn't want to piss it off. We were scared of getting a bite, so we decided to walk closer to the wall, step by step. After a few meters of walking close to the wall, the three of us tried the best to run straight as far as we could, even though the dog kept barking crazily from behind. What the hell with that dog? Why is it barking at us? I asked. Who knows, what the hell is it happening today? What I have done so that even a stray dog is bullying me? Michael replied. I guessed the dog targeted Lucas and me, but that wasn't right. He barked during seeing Michael, and at that moment, all of us weren't able to understand why. Once we stopped running, we had escaped from the angry dog chasing. At that moment, we realized that we had put our steps on the way to the familiar pond area. We had an idea to go to the pond. Since that was our favorite spot, the three of us happily opened a race to the pond. Wow! Look at this! the pond now is full of water. After a rainy night, the small pond became a bigger one. The water level had risen. There were a bunch of rotten branches had been floated on the water's surface. Right after seeing there was nothing else to play, I told Michael and Lucas, "Nothing we could play here, let's go to another place. Let's kayaking." Michael pointed to the water and suggested having a kayak trip. "But we have nothing to kayak? Haven't we?" I curiously asked. Michael pointed to the pond and showed me his boat. That was a giant floating wooden panel. There were some of the frogs, sitting and jumping around. Michael was very naughty. He found a few long sticks from the bank and jumped right to the panel. Lucas was excited and jumped to the panel. I saw the pond became more extensive, so I got a bit scared. I didn't have the gut to jump to the panel. Michael used the sticks he had found on the bank as a paddle to control the panel. While paddling, he tried to push me in. "Hurry up. Let's get in the boat, we're gonna sail." I was so convinced and tended to jump in the panel, but suddenly, the panel capsized and sank. Both Michael and Lucas fell to the water. I was scared to death, shouted aloud, "Michael! Lucas!" After a while, I saw Lucas got out of the water. He grabbed another wood. I tried to pull Lucas to the bank. But Michael was nowhere to be found then. Lucas and I stood at the bank, called Michael aloud, but we didn't see him at all. We were frightened and rushed back to the village to call for help. A while after, lots of people and boats had been brought to the pond to look for Michael. They had found for hours, but he was still nowhere to be found. Probably he had died, but where could his body was? The paddle which Michael and Lucas used had been found as well and brought to the bank. That turned out a coffin's cover. Michael's father had used a few pumps to pump out the water in the pond and find Michael. People had installed 4 pumps and run them the whole night. The following day, once the water in the pond had been pumped all out, Michael's body wasn't there. People could see clearly there was only a coffin there, at the bottom of the pond. No one knew where the coffin came from. People were curious about the coffin as well. Why is there a huge coffin here? Does it was brought here by the heavy rain last night? People came down and closer to the coffin. They wanted to bristle the coffin to check if Michael was under the coffin. The coffin was too heavy. People took a while of hard work. The moment the coffin had been turned around, people all froze. That was weird and very scary. Michael's body was really there, under the coffin. He was holding tightly by the corpse in the coffin, but no one could explain why he was under there and being held by the corpse. People in the village then turned the pond to be a pool of rubbish, year after year, when I grew up and got a chance to hear about spiritual stories. I heard about people who die soon would see their own soul, which probably why Michael saw his own before going to school. If I hear about that earlier, we might never lose him. That particular day, I would not let him go to the pond. The Premonition. This story is about Smith's family in a small town. Smith's family was very well known for their wealth around the area. Still, after a bizarre, unbelievable event, they became destitute. The story had been spread out everywhere by the villagers. In the beginning, Smith's family was still the most famous noble clan in the area. The father was too old back then. He had been sick so bad, at his last night, he had called his only son, David, to his deathbed and told him an important thing. "Son, you gotta listen to me. You have to do those things after I die." Before he had David, he and his wife birthed another son. But the son was such an unlucky baby. He had been sick after a few days of being born and died already. The father had buried his first son at the foothill. That was in the winter. Snows had covered the ground thickly, and it was frozen to death. On his way back, the father saw a man lying on the snowy ground. He looked like he was dying because of cold or probably hungry. The father had lost his first baby, so he had become full-hearted at that moment and decided to bring the man home to save him. The man woke up in the house the following morning. He introduced that he was a shaman and wanted to pay the father back for his kindness. "Master, your family had been destined to lose all your fortune very soon, but you have saved my life. I'll try to help you to keep your fortune as long as you're alive." The father didn't understand what the shaman told him, but he still believed in his words. As the shaman instructed, the method was so scary and brutal. When the first son of the smith's father had died, within 7 days, the baby's spirit wasn't escaped his body yet. The father had to pin an iron nail to his dead son's head to keep the baby's spirit on that body forever. After then, the father had to bring the baby's body back and be buried in the middle of his main gate and prayed for his son's spirit to stay and save his fortune. After the father passed away, the shaman added that the family had to dig the baby's skeleton out, bury the baby's body along with the father at the family's cemetery to make up for his suffers after all of those years. Time flew, it was 20 years had passed by. Smith's family still kept their wealth, and at that moment, the father was on dead bed. He handed the last important thing to his son, David. He said to him over and over again, "Son, you gotta do that for me." After those last words, he had gone. His body had been kept in the house for 2 days, and the next 3 days was his funeral. The third day after he died, David remembered his father's dying wishes. He went to the main gate and tended to dig out the skeleton. There was indeed a baby skeleton under there. In the center of the skull, there was a nail as well. David looked at the skeleton, but he was confused. To be honest, David knew he wasn't good at running the business. He worried that how could he manage the whole thing after his father died. If he followed his father's dying wishes, everything would collapse in front of him. He had known how to keep his family's fortune, why he would dig the skeleton out. He wanted to let it as was to keep the fortune forever. And so, David changed his mind. He buried the skeleton back as before. Then he stood up and backed to the funeral. After a few steps, David heard a sound of nails sounded like they were bumped into each other's. He tackled since he was wrongdoing. David gave his eyes around him. That was no one around in the middle of the night, and at the funeral, he dazed for a sec and realized that he had a buzzing in his ears. David thought that was because of exhaustion, so he headed to his room to take a rest. The following day, David woke up, but he didn't get any better. He started to get dizzy, and the buzzing looked more serious to his ears. On the third day, one of his relatives realized he got a very withering and tired face. The relative thought that was because of his father's death and soothed him. "David, don't be heavy-hearted like that. Everything is gonna be fine. All you should do now is finishing your father's funeral well, then take a good rest. You gotta take care of your family business in the future." David escorted the relative to the gate afterward before he left. After hearing those soothing words, David felt better, but suddenly, he saw a pool of blood at the main gate. Looked more carefully, the pool of blood was placed at where he had buried the skeleton back. To be more exact, he saw the ground was bleeding. He got pale and frightened. The relative saw his face changed suddenly, so he asked what happened to David. "David, what happened? Are you okay?" David was able to pull himself together after a certain amount of time. He looked back to the pool of blood, but there was nothing there, all clean. In the next 2 days, David got paranoid sometimes. He saw blood everywhere. He guarded his father's coffin at night and tried to rest in the daytime. However, even he took a very good rest, he still kept paranoia. He scared everything, even himself. He was likely to be drowned in his sins. A part of him from inside told that he and his family was gonna be okay. He did the right thing to keep his family's fortune. Still, another side of him reminded those paranoias were all warns. One day, David got a weird dream. He saw he was being in a dark room. He heard some sound, sort of iron stick bumped to each other. He turned his head back in the dream. David saw his father was nailed something by an iron nail. He looked more carefully. His father was nailed a baby's skull. His father's face looked glum. Just in a few seconds, there were lots of black smoke flew out from the skull's eyes. The smoke was not quite black. There was purple and blue formed some scary faces. They flew towards David and surrounded him shortly. Those scary misshapen faces made him scared to death and crouched like a ball. The sounds were louder and louder to his ears and really dissonant. David covered his ears, but that was helpless. The sound was likely from his mind. Those black smokes came surrounded him, and he was nowhere to hide. Then he saw all black and his head got headache all of sudden. Once he awakened, David realized that he was placed at the baby position. He was nailing to the head, and his own father brutally pinned the nail to his head. David screamed aloud badly. The next second he awakened, David's body all got sweats. He was very sure that was his unlucky older brother came to warn him in the dream. David wanted to dig out the skeleton, but there were so many people at his father's funeral. At that moment, he heard a knock door sound. David thought out carefully. He shouldn't have dug out the skeleton in front of the whole visitors, so he planned to dig out at night, then built a small graveyard secretly. He followed the plan. David buried his father as usual. His family was prestigious in the area, so lots of people came to share their condolences. Everyone would keep an eye on him, so he knew that he could not make a wrong move. Right after the ceremony, he came to the gate and brought his father's name tag along. Out of the blue, after he stepped out of the door, David saw those black smokes as in his dream. Those scary misshapen faces appeared as well in front of him. He was terrified. Short of a step at the door, he fell to the ground and got hit in the head. David got hurt, his head was bleeding, and he fainted. Everything messed up at the funeral. People tried to shook him up and called a doctor. David awakened a few moments afterward. Right after he opened his eyes, he didn't care about his status, bleeding on the head. He instantly tried to come to the gate. Then he used his bare hands, dug out at the gate in front of the whole visitors there. His reactions drove people to feel weird. Someone tried to stop him, but he ignored everyone. Even though his nails bleed because of digging too much, he continued to dig out. People gradually believed that David might get out of his mind and was doing some stupid things, but then they saw a white skeleton there. David had to dig out a white baby skeleton. David bowled in front of the skeleton and asked the butler to prepare another funeral. He wanted to bury the baby along with his father. Even though many people tried to stop him, David was very determined to bury the baby along with his father that night. Eventually, a few years later, David was unable to sustain his family business as before. Failures from time to time, then debts. Smith's family from a wealthy business family, then became a typical farmer family. That bizarre stuff that happened at Smith's father's funeral became a source of rumors. People said that the family lost all their fortune because the ghost had cursed them, or someone told that that was because David had killed a baby and buried at the gate. However, afterward, David still kept his silence, and there was only he knew the truth. Revenge of the Old Fox. I was born and raised in the Northeast Highland, so I loved the mountain and the stories about the plateau. Among those stories, there was thrilling, attractive, and demonically telling about the mountain creatures. I had heard my grandma told me those exciting stories when I was a child. Those stories made my childhood and taught me many valuable things. Most of them were magical to kids like us back then. After eating, we always gathered around her and asked her to tell us those stories. The story that interested me the most was about animals. People said that, at the Northeast Highland, there were 5 great animals: fox, weasel, snake, porcupine, and mouse. Those animals got their own culture. Some of them became fairies or demons. Some of them even had married a human. They hide out to stay away from the human being. Today, we are going to hear about Fox's family. This story was from my town. That morning, I was playing balls in the yard. I heard Uncle Lucas screamed aloud. He was my neighbor. It turned out the foxes had eaten his ducks. He was cursing the fox, "Son of the bitches, useless animal, such a troublemaker." I was curious and ran toward his house. He was holding a duck in his hand. The duck was bleeding on its tummy. Its organs had been taken all out by the foxes. Lucas still kept insulting. "Damn it, I'm unable to stay till like this. This is the second time in this week. Stop cursing. Find somewhere to bury that duck." His mother came and told him. She was very old but still got a clear mind and healthy. The following morning, I came out to urinate and hearing Uncle Lucas mumbled as if he was talking to himself. He likely caught the fox which had stolen his ducks. "Let's see if you dare to take my ducks ever." I was curious and climbed through the wall to see what happened in their yard. I saw Uncle Lucas was holding a trap in his hand. There was a fox trapped inside. He smiled and sacrificed as if he was releasing his anger. "Let's me see if you could dare to eat my ducks ever." His mother asked him to release the fox, but he wasn't listening to her. He brought the dead fox body to the backyard and tossed it to the open area then. His mother asked him to stop trapping as well, but he wasn't listening. Lucas was afraid that if he brought the trap away, another fox would come to his house and took his ducks. As a result of that, the following day, there was another fox that got trapped and killed. People in the town had a taboo for trapping or killing foxes since they were one of the 5 mascots at the Northeast Highland people in the village. His mother got worried about those killed foxes. His mother warned him, "Stop trapping foxes. It would be dangerous if you offend them." Villagers advised him, "Please detach your trap if you want to be safe." That's right, don't ask for trouble. But Uncle Lucas was very stubborn. He wasn't listening to anyone. He got pissed off at everyone and yelled at them, "What wrong with you? Why do you get scared like that? Are obvious those foxes killed our animals first? How could I let them lord it over us here?" Then, 4 days in the row, a fox had died every day by Lucas's traps, so there were 4 dead foxes. On the 4th night, the 4th fox died while everyone was asleep. Suddenly, my mother heard a weird sound in the yard. It was likely something terrible had happened. She woke my father up, and that noise woke me up as well. "Honey, do you hear something outside?" That was really annoying, but the sound wasn't from our yard. "That was from Lucas's family next door," my father replied. I wore my coat and ran after my father outside. There was a crowd outside. People were gathering around Lucas's family. "Stand up. Why are you guys doing that?" I followed my father and saw that all 4 members of the family were knelt down. All of them were widening their eyes, but their eyes went haywire, lifeless. In front of each of them was a fox. The 4th of them knelt in front of a dead fox body as if they were asking for forgiveness. My father saw the others just stood there and watched them. Without any help, my father spoke up. "Why do you guys just stand there? Why not lift them up? Lucas, what wrong with you? Why do you kneel? Stand up, everyone." My father reached his hands to Lucas and tended to lift him up. My father had tried multiple times, but Lucas could not move, as if he was rooted to the ground. People replied, "If we could, we had done it already." Lucas's family was in trouble. They had offended the Fox's family. Everyone knew how Lucas trapped the foxes. There were 4 dead foxes, and 4 of them have knelt for apologies. Everyone believed this was 80% from the fox fairy came to punish them. Everyone had believed in the fairy tale about the highland, about the incredible animals in the plateau. Fairy Fox was included. My father could not stand there and saw Lucas's family like that. "We should think of how to help them. Why do you guys just stand there?" People realized there was only one guy who could help the family. That was Mr. William, an old hunter. He had been well known due to his charisma and understanding of the highland. Some of them had come and brought Mr. William there. Once Mr. William came by, seeing the 4th knelt in a line and the 4th dead foxes on the ground. He put his gun down. They were hypnotized, probably. Back then, guns weren't banned nowadays, so people could bring a gun beside them, especially a hunter. Mr. William gunned up to the sky and fired 2 times. The gun sounded basically loud, and it was likely to be more echoing in the middle of the night. Right after hearing the gun fired, the 4th members had shivered and awakened. Lucas's family drowsily looked around and tried to read the scene. They could not remember how they knelt down at the gate and in front of lots of people like that. Mr. William left after dropped them a word, "Be careful. Fox is famous for vengeful and practical. You guys had killed their fellows. They were unable to go easy on you. They will take revenge sooner or later." After seeing what happened to the Lee family, I especially kept an eye on them. I was curious what could happen for them afterward and how the foxes take another revenge. 2 days passed by after the night they had knelt. In the morning, I saw an old lady came to their yard. She was holding a basket. Lucas's mother was hanging their clothes in the front yard. She saw the stranger and asked, "Who are you looking for?" The old lady spoke word by word clearly to her, "I came to collect the debts." The mother was confused and unable to understand what happened. She even didn't recognize who the lady was. How could her family owe her? What a debt! My family had owed you what? Don't try to crook or brat to me. Your family is in debt to us, our 4 generations. The mother got confused, walked off. "Who are you? How dare you ask me like that? Don't you remember the debt? How could you react as nothing has happened?" The old lady got angry. She put her basket down to the flour mill. The mother got scared of her, wanted to dismiss the old lady from her house. What a trash talk. "Please get out of my house." But once she stepped toward her, she looked at the basket and screamed frightenedly. In the basket, there were 4 fox dead bodies that were murdered by her son. The mother faced up the old lad. At that moment, the old lady's face turned to a fox face and went close up in angry. "All of you had to pay off for my grandkids' lives." I stood behind the wall and I witnessed the whole thing. The old lady must have been the fox fairy who came to revenge. My parents weren't home at that time. I didn't know what to do, so I went to see Mr. William. I rushed to his house. There was a fox fairy who came to Lucas's house for revenge. I saw the fairy already. Mr. William picked up his short gun. Without a word, he ran into Lucas's house. He asked some of the young men on the way there to tag along with him. Once we came to Lucas's house, we saw the 4th of them were getting in line. In front of each of them was a noose. They were all set to hang themselves up. Our young men tried to stop them. But Lucas became very strong. Just with a throw, he made 2 young men fell to the ground. Mr. Williams sensed that must have been something wrong. He fired 2 times to the air. But that time, the cloud gun sounds weren't changed anything. The The fourth members of Lucas's family were ready for their hanging. They put their heads to the nooses. Mr. William got panicked, called out young men to stop them, and bought time so that he could find the Fox Ferry to end everything. There needed 3 men to hold each of them. They all enormously struggled. Once Mr. William ran outside, first heard a gun sound. I ran toward where the gun sound was. Mr. William was targeting the wall from afar. There was an old yellow fox there. The hunter fired one, but the old fox didn't run away. He tried to fire some more times. The bullets hit the wall but not the fox. I could see the fox was eyeing the hunter with its scary eyes. The fox's face was very similar to the fox fairy I had seen before at Lucas's house. Mr. William gunned up, seriously talked. If you still kept harming humans, don't ask why I chase after you. However, the fox was very consistent. It showed its teeth and likely smirked at him. The hunter floated the gun and fired one more time. The fox was swift. It could predict the bullet's direction and dodged the shot quickly. It tended to jump to the haystack nearly to run away. The hunter gave a few haphazard fires consecutively towards the fox. He got lucky. One of the bullets hit the fox while jumping. As a result of that, the hunter killed it. In that situation, the hunter had to kill the fox so that Lucas's family could be safe. He came to the dead body and mumbled, "You reap what you sow. That was you wanna hurt people first, don't come to revenge on me." Once we got back to Lucas's family, they all gained back their consciousness, just like the night before. They were all unable to know what happened, as if they had been controlled by someone. Since then, Lucas's family had been safe and got no more troubles with foxes. But then, there was an extraordinary event that happened to Mr. William. His short gun had been fired when he was hunting on the mountain. Half of his face had burned. He looked scary and ugly. The scar made him like he was wearing a half-fox mask. That might be the revenge of the fox to him. That was an actual event that I had been eyewitnessed when I was a child. There were many thrilling and scary stories about 5 great animals, but that was a special one and got stuck in my memory. The Ancient Tomb. That morning, a man came to report a case very early. There was a big explosion in the mountain. People suspected there was vandalism. James, Michael, and some of the police officers instantly followed the man to investigate the case. That is right in front of us, the foothill where the explosion had been found. The man talked to them. The case was confirmed at West Foothill in the west of the city. As the historical records, there was an ancient tomb under there. Police officers suspected that the grave thieves had targeted that ancient tomb. Once the man took James and his 2 fellows to the scene, there were many giant stone statues. James knew that those statues had been built to guard the tomb. Back then, ancient people usually built stone statues formed as animals and put them in front of the tomb for spiritual powers. They believed that those statues could protect the tomb well. While nearly stepping to the crime scene, James reminded his crew had to be careful since grave thieves weren't simple. "Everyone, you gotta be careful. Nowadays, grave thief has weapons with them. We don't know what could they have. They are very bold. Don't downplay them." When walking through the statues, the man pointed ahead. "That's it, here we are." James saw a big hole from afar. The soil had been explored out badly due to the explosion as reported, which looked new, might be just happened a few hours earlier. They came up close to the hole, which was really the entrance to the tomb for grave thieves. The spot led straight to the ground. There was a rope as well, which was tied to one of the giant statues nearby, followed the hole. The other end had been dropped to the tomb. James watched around carefully, but there was no one there. They had been down there to the tomb. We gotta come under to check out. They might be still there. James decided to come down to the grave. Chief, that is unclear what it could be under the tomb. Lemme come down first. You could be here to wait and check around. Michael requested to come first. James worried that Michael could not handle everything there by himself. He replied, because that is unclear down there. I have to go down there with you to be sure. Moreover, James requested Lucas to stay put up there, to call back up if there was anything. Lucas, you stay put here, and call back up if needed, okay? After settling things down, James and Michael came down to the tomb by using the rope. James came first. One of his hands held a gun, his other hand had a flashlight. He turned to Michael, Michael, be careful, and follow my lead. The two of them had walked in the long dark hall of the ancient tomb. They had walked for a while, but there was no sign of the grave thieves. Then James suddenly stopped. He saw someone in front of them. Michael, there is someone here. James slashed the flashlight ahead. A man was standing in the hallway afar. James shouted out, police. Hand up. He shouted a few times, but the man didn't move. James came up close to the man's behind and pointed the gun to the man's head. Surprisingly, the man tilted. He fell on the ground. James and Michael could see him clearly then. There were many arrows on his body. He had died a long time earlier. Probably, the man had been trapped by one of the traps of this tomb. He had stopped bleeding. Definitely, he had died a while. His partner might be still in there. We gotta be quick. James thought that the grave thieves didn't leave yet. They walked a bit more and saw the center of the tomb ahead. James had shed light. Michael, quick, the center of the tomb was right in front of us. They continued to walk deeper to the tomb. Another dead body was found. Chief, look at this. This man doesn't look live at the same time with us. He looked like from the past. Michael gazed at the dead body. He furrowed his eyebrows. That man had died. He couldn't examine how long, but the dead body had turned to be a withered corpse. His clothes looked like the people from the past. James thought that was one of the first grave thieves there. They passed by the corpse. James and Michael crept to the coffin in the center. They looked inside to check carefully. The two of them widened their eyes surprisingly. The tomb was very messed up. There was another dead body lying in the ground with a sword through his chest. There were some other weapons around the dead body. The coffin in the center had been opened. Moreover, there was a stone tablet in the tomb. They saw a wearing armor man was holding a sword and tended to stab a knelt man. Police, hand off your weapon. James was unable to instantly read the scene. The man with the armor was the owner of the tomb or one of the thieves. In that situation, he could not let anyone be killed or hold any weapons. Hearing James's voice, but the man ignored him as if he didn't hear anything. James had no choices. He shot one to the sword. The man with the armor looked like a tycoon in the past. The shot was helpful. The sword on the tycoon's hand fell to the ground. The tycoon had been lost his weapon. He was full of surprise. At that moment, the man who was kneeling down got the opportunity, ran toward James and Michael to ask for help. Help! Help me! Countless wounds were dropping blood on his body. He ran towards Michael and shouted, "Please help! He was haunted by a ghost. He is gonna kill me." Michael handcuffed the man. He was so panicked but was still able to summarize what happened to him. He told them that the man in the tycoon clothes was one of his partners. He was haunted by the ghost in the tomb and tended to take revenge on him. Help! Ghost, he was haunted, run! The grave thief shouted in panic. James sensed something wrong, but he was unable to confirm that man was human or not. The tycoon in the armor suddenly eye-rolled, had a heavy breath. They could saw there was white smoke from his noses, looked very scary. Since he was a murderer, police could not stay till James and Michael took out their gun and pointed toward the man in the armor. "Hand up, you're under arrest." James and Michael came close to him. The man was standing still, without a word. While the two police were hesitating, the tycoon suddenly grabbed the gun from Michael. Michael tended to take the gun back, but his opponent was powerful. Then he heard, "Scatter." The gun had been scattered in his hands. The situation turned to be bad. At that moment, James gave the tycoon a fire, but the bullet hit his armor, so the man was still fine. The gunshot drove the tycoon angry. He turned to James with his pop eyes. Michael took the chance to punch a strong one to the tycoon's head, but the punch didn't matter. With just a through hand from him, Michael was lying on the ground. He was so strong, Michael had been felt 4 to 5 meters away and hit his head to the wall. He got dizzy and nearly passed out. James took the opportunity at that moment. He kicked to the head of the man in the armor. Surprisingly, his head plate had been flown out of his body. That was an excellent shot, but once James turned to him, he saw he was picking his sword up from the ground. Instantly, the tycoon stabbed James by the sword strongly. "Careful, Chief." Michael watched from the behind and tended to join and save James, but that was too late. The man was powerful. The sword had stabbed James's body. Blood was streaming from his body instantly. James hugged the man tight to buy time for Michael. Since he assumed the man wasn't normal, even he and Michael together couldn't stop him, so he would like to hug the man so that Michael could have enough time to run out. "Michael, run." Michael saw his chief was in a bad injury. His eyes turned red. Michael didn't want to run away. Michael stepped a heavy step toward him, desperately. "Chief." At that moment, the tycoon pushed James out. By chance, Michael held an iron stick tightly on the ground. He hit the iron stick to the tycoon. The tycoon might be more potent than an average person. Even though he was solid or mad, he was surprised by Michael's hit. He fell to the ground and passed out. Michael rushed to James's place to check out the wounds. "Chief, how are you? Are you okay?" Michael lifted James up. He was indeed in a bad injury. Michael had checked him up overall. There was a stab through his chest, and he got bleeding non-stop. James tried to stand up, but he was collapsed to the ground. He was shaking and unable to stand up straight since that was a terrible injury. At that moment, Lucas reached there to back them up. James had passed out. Even Michael had called him multiple times, but he could not awaken. James had been taken to the hospital right after then. Regarding the tycoon, he had been detained at the Institute 703, the research center for the exceptional cases. To make it clear, Michael came directly and questioned the alive grave thief. "Please tell us what happened truly from the start." He smashed the table badly and yelled at him. However, the grave thief had given an unbelievable answer. He declared that there were 4 members in his group. They had heard about the tomb under the west foothill, so they created a big hole as an entrance. But once they put their feet under the tomb, the first one had stepped in a trap and died instantly by dozens of arrows. The other 3 started panicking but still decided to continue to risk their lives to go to the center. They got a belief there would be a fortune in the tomb, and they would be rich afterward. But except for weapons, there was no valuable stuff around them in the center of the tomb, so they decided to open the coffin to find luck. The owner of that tomb was indeed a tycoon in the past. His body was withering as a corpse there. Unfortunately, there was no treasure or any valuable things in the tycoon's coffin. "Ethan, what are you doing?" The leader had spoken up. The whole crew was disappointed with that treasure hunting trip. They couldn't find any things. One of them leaned toward the coffin and picked up the sword right next to the tycoon in the coffin. Just by a glance, They could see that was a precious sword. The leader was so afraid that the sword might be broken. He raised his voice, "Be careful. Don't broke that precious sword." Suddenly, Ethan used the sword to stab the leader's chest, the one he called brother. The leader fell to the ground and died swiftly. The other one was frightened. Surprisingly, he saw Ethan took and wore the tycoon's armor. "Ethan, are you insane? What are you doing?" After the moment Ethan wore the armor, he was likely to be another one. His voice had changed. He introduced himself as the owner of the tomb, the tycoon. "How dare you to come here to bother me? Don't you want to live?" What are you talking about? What do you want?" The man was frightened to death and unable to read the scene then. "You invaded my place. All of you are gonna be punished. You are all gonna die." Ethan upheld the sword and tended to kill his partner. He was not like the Ethan everyone knew. He was controlled by the tycoon's ghost. "Please, forgive me. Please, tycoon." His partner begged the tycoon for forgiveness. Right after the blade was in front of his nose, fortunately, James and Michael reached and stopped the tycoon in a sneak of time. He was nearly killed by the tycoon in his partner's body. "Luckily, you guys come in time, or else I'm unable to sit here. All I told you are the truth." The grave thief told them in fear for what he had been through. Michael and another police officer turned to each other and ended the investigation there. "We have questioned for dozen times, but he still keeps trash talking. He is such a stubborn one. What do you think, Michael?" "I don't think he is a liar, but I don't think there is a ghost haunting in this world. We gotta wait for the examined result from Professor William, to be sure. I am going to Institute 703. Everything here would be on you." Michael headed to Institute 703 to check the examination about the man in the armor in the tomb, named Ethan. That was a unique research center. Michael came to Professor William and asked after Ethan the grave thief. "Professor William, what is Ethan's case result? Is he really insane or just pretended to be?" This is really interesting, Michael." Professor Williams said that Ethan had introduced him as a tycoon, an actual tycoon in the past, and recorded in the ancient book. They looked to the cell where Ethan had been. Inside there, he was growling and mumbled some weird stuff. "Let's see how I punished you. How dare you touch me, a great tycoon. Once I get out of here, I'll chop your head out one by one." That was astounding to them. The tycoon that Ethan called him was very prestigious and majestic, who had been written in the history books. The tomb was his afterlife house. Ethan was illiteracy, and didn't know who the tycoon was prior. He definitely wasn't able to say in an ancient way like that. Professor William gathered all of the information and gave Michael the results. The rest would be handled by 703 institutes. The rest would be handled by us. I have written in details in this file. Here you are. When Michael was nearly leaving, Professor William asked him, "Transfer those to that old man and tell him to come by any time. I'll buy him a drink." The old man he had mentioned was no one other than James. He was hospitalized due to his lousy injury. Even he got stabbed, but the sword didn't touch his heart, so he was like a revenant. "Chief, this is the case's result." Michael came to the hospital and handed him the file. Michael had reported in details the case's progress to James. "Thank you, Michael." James took the file and gave him a smile. After then, he read the file. Then he asked Michael to bring the file to the office's store and sealed it up. Human soup. Noah and Sophia were friends at the university. Their friendship was quickly becoming love, but that was not like the other narrow-minded kids' relationship. After graduation, they had stayed in the city and got married. Sophia was from an unhappy family. When she was little, her father drank every day and badly hit her and her mother afterward. Those bad memories had obsessed her, even though her parents got devoted. Sophia moved and lived with her mother, but she could not forget those bad days, days of being abusive. That's why she was unable to open up to anyone and always got an insecure feeling. That might be why she was being with Noah. She was so dependent on her boyfriend that she could not live without him even a sec. When she was not with Noah, she would consecutively text or call him to check him out. Noah had a warm and sweet heart. He was not aware of what his girlfriend went through in the past. Sometimes, he felt she was kittenish and controlled him too much. But he thought it was simply girly of her and would report in detail where he was and what he was doing to his girlfriend. After 2 years of marriage, Sophia and Noah saved enough money, and thanks to their family's support, they could buy a house near the ring road and started their sweet home there. After Sophia had pregnant their first child, Noah tried harder to work. Quickly, he could open his circle and business. With his clear-headedness, his director had handed him an excellent opportunity to handle an important project. If he wanted the project to be successful, he had to improve marketing. Noah had to give all his efforts in it. In the last 4 days, Noah decided to stay overnight at the company to focus on the project. Noah knew that his wife would not agree to his decision. Still, he had no other solution because his partner was in the US, which the time zone was different than his current location. He had to stay over to make sure he could be there when needed. There were calls and online meetings at midnight. On the first night, Sophia called him in tears. "Honey, please come home soon. I'm scared of being alone. Honey, I need to focus on this project. You know, this is very important to me, to us. Give me a few days, just 4 days, honey." Noah tried to explain to his wife. "I always have my phone with me. Call me when you miss me. I'll come home instantly once everything is done to have your homemade soup." Noah hung up the phone. He knew that it was rude to let Sophia alone home, but there was nothing he could do. He hoped Sophia could be braver. She was nearly a mother, she had to be strong. The following days, he called home and felt his wife's situation wasn't good. Even it was negative, he was worried. Still, shortly he had been distracted by his large amount of works. On the 4th night, Noah called his wife, but she didn't pick up the phone. He tried to call her back 4 more times, but no one picked up the phone. He got butterflies in his stomach. She wouldn't be able to sleep if she didn't hear his voice. Why she could sleep in such that early? But then, he had been asked to go to the director's room. He temporarily set his wife aside and backed to his work. 9 a.m. in the following morning, he received good news from his partner from the US. His project got certified. Noah stepped out of the office and gave a relief sign. After days of concentration, he got paid off. He would have some time for relaxation. Suddenly, there was someone's hand put on his shoulder. Noah turned back and realized that was his chairman, Mr. William. Mr. William could not hide his happiness in his face. Noah could see the trust sparkle in the chairman's eyes. The chairman was appreciated what Noah had contributed to the company. His one project would bring a great benefit to the company and affirmed his ability. "Noah, this was all on you. It was such a hard time for you. Good job. You have stayed over here for days. Let's have some days off to take a rest home. Your wife must have been worried sick." He approved for Noah's days off to take a rest after the stressful works. Right after hearing, "wife," Noah turned pale. He was too busy to remember about his kittenish wife being home alone. He remembered she had neglected his call the day before. His heart was bouncing faster. He worried for his wife. Noah took on his phone and called his wife. The worries disappeared once he heard his wife's voice over the phone. "Hey, honey, But the voice sounded small. She was likely to stand a few meters from the phone. Noah overlooked that abnormal detail. He asked his wife, "Honey, why didn't you call me back yesterday? I called you, but you didn't pick up. You have gone to sleep early, or you are sick." Sophia didn't reply. There was a big silence. Noah thought that his wife was unhappy with him, so he comforted her with good news. "Honey, the director allowed me to take some days off. I'm going to come home real quick. Are you gonna cook me my favorite soup? I wanna eat that soup." At that moment, there was a reply from the other end of the phone. That was really Sophia's voice, but it seemed she was panicking. "Yes, sure, I'll make you a soup." After then, he heard a noise consequence on the phone. Then Sophia hung up. Even Noah sensed something abnormal. Still, all he thought about that time was coming home. Everything would be easier to be talked in person to his wife. As usual, he would take a bus home, but that day, he wanted to go home as quickly as possible, so he took a taxi, and shortly he reached home. "Honey, I'm home." Noah happily stepped into his house, but at that time, he felt that must have been something wrong. The temperature was slower than outside. He saw the conditioner was running in the living room. He gazed to the kitchen. His wife was sitting on the table and waiting for him. Noah gave her a sweet smile. "Honey, are you waiting for me? I'm home." Sophia faced down without a word and looked angry at him. Noah saw a bowl of soup on the table. Noah thought that everything must be okay since she had made him a soup already. "Oh, looks delicious. I'ma eats the soup." Noah decided to eat the soup first since he was starving. Seeing him eating the soup happily, his wife must have been happier. He was unable to stand in front of the good smell of soup. He held up the bowl and poured all the soup into his mouth. The soup was different. It was sourer than usual, so he could swallow it in one gulp. That was strange, as if there was magic to help him murder the soup, and he wanted to have another one. "Honey, what did you add to the soup today? It's so yummy." Noah turned to ask his wife, but she froze at that moment. He stood up and tended to pour another soup into his bowl. There was no light on in the kitchen. He saw a big pot on the gas stove. "Here the soup is," he thought, and opened the lid. He got panicked from what he could see. There was a human hand in the pot. He got nauseous. He turned around suddenly and saw his wife was lying on the ground. Tints of blood were all around her. He tried to widen his eyes to confirm if that was his wife, but that was really her on the ground. He quickly ran to his wife and shook her. "Sophia, Sophia. What happened?" Her face was pale, lifeless. She died for a while. Obviously, Noah saw there were lots of sleeping pills scattered next to her. He looked around. His wife's left hand was removed from her body. No way. That was her hand on the pot. At that moment, Noah was scared to death. He gazed his eyes to the table. He still saw Sophia sitting there, froze. She was immobilized, as same as a dead body. That robbed him of all of his strength. His legs were unable to stand up, and he fell to the ground. His heart got bouncer and bouncer. Everything went black in front of him. He tried to pick up his phone. He lost his consciousness and was unclear what he had done, who he had called. Once he woke up, he was at the hospital. There were 2 policemen right next to him. "Mr. Noah, I'm very sorry to tell you this sad news. Your wife, Sophia, died 2 days ago." One of them spoke up to Noah. "What? What are you talking about? I don't believe it. Why did my wife die? She wasn't sick or got an accident. Why?" Noah lost his control and screamed aloud. After waiting for Noah to calm down, they told him more in detail. "We had investigated the scene and confirmed that your wife suicided by sleeping pills. They had read Sophia's diaries and found that Sophia had a major depressive disorder because of her past. Since she got pregnant, her depression got serious, she got insomnia, but she had not told her husband. 4 days of office working with her husband pushed her deep to collapse and depression. The only unexplainable details were about the hand on the soup pot after Sophia died, no sign of intruder in the house, and the hot soup as well, who had made that soup. After then, the case had been closed. People said that was Sophia who turned to be a ghost after she died and chopped her hand to cooking her husband the soup. She had picked up the phone and welcomed him home. But that was just a rumor, no one could verify it. Regarding Noah, he had been totally collapsed. After being out of the hospital, he got crazy and roamed around, such a poor man.